My mother abandoned me for 10 years. She came back crying right before I turned 18. But I recorded her plan to steal my dead father's inheritance and exposed her in front of everyone. I'm 23 years old. I work as an administrative assistant at an accounting firm, and I need to tell this story because basically what happened with my mother a few years ago still haunts me, you know? And the thing is, when people ask me about my family, I never know exactly what to tell them. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I was a baby, and my dad died. I don't have a single memory of him, obviously, but according to what my Uncle Henry, my dad's brother, told me, he died in a car accident when I was like 8 months old. What I do know is that my dad left a pretty large life insurance policy, like a considerable inheritance that was kept in my name until I turned 18. And that's important for everything that happened later, but I'll get to that. My mom stayed with me after my dad died, and according to the few photos I have, it seemed like we were a normal family. I mean, her and me against the world and all that. But when I was 6 years old, almost 7, one day my mom took me to my Uncle Henry's house. I remember that day perfectly because it was really hot. It was summer, and my mom had a big suitcase and told me I'd have to stay with my uncle for a while because she had to go on a business trip. I cried, obviously, because I'd never been away from her for that long. But my mom promised she'd come back soon, that it would only be a few weeks. My Uncle Henry, who was like 35 at the time, didn't seem very happy about the situation, but he agreed, and my mom left. Those few weeks turned into months, and the months into years. And basically my mom never came back. She just disappeared from my life as if I had never existed. At first Uncle Henry tried to be nice, I guess, but over time he got increasingly resentful. I don't completely blame him, honestly, because he didn't ask to raise his dead brother's daughter, but it's not like I had chosen to be there either. He made it constantly clear that I was a burden to him, like comments about how I ate too much, that clothes cost him money, that if it weren't for him I'd be in an orphanage. He never hit me or anything physical, but words can hurt just as much or worse, you know what I mean? He'd say things like, I was just as irresponsible as my mother, that's probably why she left. Because I was a difficult child. I was 7, 8, 9 years old hearing this constantly, and I started to believe it. I started to think that there really was something wrong with me that made people abandon me. A school became my escape. I focused completely on homework, on getting good grades, on keeping myself busy so I wouldn't have to think about how miserable my life at my uncle's house was. I'd come home from school, do my homework, lock myself in my room, and basically that's how years went by. I didn't have many friends because I never invited anyone to the house. I was embarrassed for them to see how I lived, and I also couldn't go to other kids' houses because my uncle never gave me permission. But when I was like 14, I met Megan on a science project we had to do together. Megan was everything opposite to me. I mean, extroverted, funny, always smiling. And for some reason, she decided she wanted to be my friend. At first, I kind of kept her at a distance. But she was persistent. And eventually, I told her a bit about my situation at home. Megan invited me to her house one afternoon after school to work on the project, and when I arrived and met her family, I literally felt like I had entered another world. Her mom made us cookies. Her dad asked us about our classes. They had a dog that wouldn't stop jumping with happiness, and everything felt so warm and normal that I almost started crying right there. From that day on, Megan's family basically unofficially adopted me. I started spending more and more time at their house. I ate with them at least 3 times a week. They included me in their weekend outings, and for the first time in years, I felt what it was like to have a real family. Megan's mom would buy me clothes when she noticed mine were too old, and her dad, Mr. Peterson, always asked me how I was doing in school and helped me with math when I needed it. They knew my situation. We never explicitly talked about all the details, but they knew my uncle wasn't exactly guardian of the year. My Uncle Henry didn't seem to care that I spent so much time away from the house. I think he even found it convenient not to have me there as much. I still lived with him, slept there, but my real life was with Megan's family. I spent middle school years and the beginning of high school like that, basically surviving at my uncle's house but really living when I was with the Petersons. Megan and I became inseparable. She was like the sister I never had, and her family was my chosen family. You know? They never made me feel like I was a burden or that I was in the way. Quite the opposite. They made me feel loved and valued in a way I didn't even know existed. Then everything changed when I turned 17. One day I came home to my uncle's after school, and there was a car I didn't recognize parked outside. I went in, and there she was, my mother, sitting in the living room like nothing, like 10 years hadn't passed since the last time I saw her. She had different hair, shorter, and she looked older, obviously, but I recognized her immediately. Next to her was a man I didn't know, like in his late 40s, wearing a suit and a smile that I don't know, gave me a bad feeling from the first moment. My mother jumped up when she saw me, with teary eyes, and said something like, "My baby, you've grown so much." And I honestly didn't know what to do, or what to feel. Part of me, the 7-year-old girl who still lived inside me, wanted to run and hug her and ask her why she left. But the other part, the one who had grown up without her for a decade, just felt anger and confusion. The man introduced himself as Scott, my mother's husband, and my mother started with this whole story about how she had to leave because of personal problems, that she'd been in therapy, that she'd thought about me every day, basically a whole explanation that sounded rehearsed and fake. I didn't say much. I just stood there processing everything, and my Uncle Henry seemed as uncomfortable as I was. My mother said she wanted to make up for lost time, that she wanted to be part of my life again, and that she hoped we could start over. I told her I needed time to think and went to my room. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell had just happened and what I was supposed to do now. Over the next few weeks, my mother and Scott started visiting me regularly. They took me to expensive restaurants, bought me clothes and things for school, asked me about my plans for college, and basically acted like super attentive and involved parents. My mother cried every time we talked, telling me how sorry she was and how much she'd missed me, and I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that she really regretted abandoning me and that she genuinely wanted to be in my life. I told Megan about all this, obviously, and she was skeptical from the beginning. She told me it was very suspicious that my mother appeared just when I was about to turn 18 and have access to my dad's inheritance, but I didn't want to think that about my own mother, you know? I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, but Megan was right. Like a month into the visits and dinners and gifts, I was at my uncle's house on a Saturday, and my mother and Scott were in the living room talking, thinking I was in my room with headphones on. But I had gone down to the kitchen for water and I heard them. Scott was saying something about how they needed to move faster because I was going to turn 18 inches a few months, and after that it would be harder. And my mother responded that she had to do it carefully, that she couldn't pressure me too much or I'd suspect. My heart literally stopped right there on the stairs. Scott said something like, "That money would get us out of all our problems. We need her to sign those papers before someone else puts ideas in her head." And my mother just sighed and said, she knew, that she was working on it. I stood there paralyzed for several minutes, processing what I had just heard. Everything, absolutely everything, had been a lie. The tears, the apologies, wanting to make up for lost time, it was all an act to get to my dad's inheritance. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, like I couldn't breathe. I went up to my room quietly, grabbed my backpack with some things, and went straight to Megan's house. When I arrived, I was crying so hard I could barely speak, and Megan's mom hugged me while I told her everything between sobs. Mr. Peterson, who's a lawyer, you think I mentioned that before, got really serious and told me we needed to handle this carefully. Over the next few weeks, I kept seeing my mother and Scott, but now I was acting just like them. I recorded our conversations on my phone every time we met, on Mr. Peterson's advice. My suspicions were confirmed when Scott started being more direct. At one dinner, he told me that my mother had been through very difficult financial times, that they had invested in a business that had failed, and that if I wanted to help her when I had access to my inheritance, it would mean a lot to them. I just nodded and said I'd think about it, while my phone recorded everything in my pocket. Another time, Scott asked me directly if I knew how much money was in my father's trust fund, and I lied and said I wasn't sure, that my uncle had never given me details. He told me he could help me review the documents, that he worked in finance law. We later found out he'd never worked in that, and that he could make sure I knew how to manage that money correctly. Things reached a breaking point like 2 weeks before my 18th birthday. Scott asked me to meet him alone, without my mother, because he wanted to talk to me man to man about my future. We met at a coffee shop, and there, without beating around the bush, he told me that my mother and he needed me to sign some documents where I transferred 60% of my inheritance to them. He said it was only fair because my mother had spent years suffering and regretting, and that besides, they had taken care of me during the last month and a half with all the dinners and gifts. I just looked at him and told him I needed to think about it, that it was a lot of money and a lot of responsibility, and he got a little aggressive saying that my mother deserved that money, that she was my mother after all and that I owed her for giving me life. I had all of this recorded, every word. I told Mr. Peterson everything, and he helped me plan what to do. We arranged a meeting with my mother and Scott, supposedly to discuss the documents Scott wanted me to sign. I told them to meet me at a neutral restaurant, and when they arrived, I was already there with Mr. Peterson. My mother's face, when she saw Megan and her dad sitting with me, was total panic, but she tried to hide it. Scott immediately got defensive, asking who this man was and why he was there. Mr. Peterson introduced himself as my lawyer and legal representative, and the tension at that table was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My mother tried to start with her usual act, with the tears and everything, but I interrupted her. I told her I knew exactly why she had come back, that I had heard her conversation with Scott that day at my uncle's house, and that I had recordings of all the times they had tried to manipulate me into giving them my dad's money. My mother's face turned white, completely white, and Scott started stammering something about how I had misunderstood everything. Mr. Peterson took out his laptop and showed them transcripts of the recordings, asking them if they wanted us to play the audios right there in the restaurant for everyone to hear, or if they preferred to be honest for once. Scott tried to get up and I thought he was going to leave, but Mr. Peterson told him to sit down, that we weren't finished yet. My mother started crying, but these weren't the fake tears from before. These looked real, desperate. She started saying yes, that they had come for the money, that they were in a terrible financial situation, that Scott had gambling debts he couldn't pay, and that she thought I wouldn't notice, that she thought she could take the money and disappear again. She literally admitted that her plan was to get me to sign those papers and then cut me out of her life again. Hearing my mother admit all of that, confirm that she never really cared about me, was like something was being ripped out from inside me. But at the same time, it was liberating in a way, because I no longer had to wonder if it had been my fault that she left. I told my mother, looking her straight in the eyes, that I never wanted to see her again, that she had 10 years to be my mom and chose not to be, and that I wasn't going to let her show up now just to steal the only thing my dad left me. Scott tried to say something about how I was ungrateful, that they had given me attention and time. But Mr. Peterson told him to either shut up or we were going to consider legal action for attempted fraud and coercion of a minor. They got up and left, and my mother turned once before leaving, and I swear the expression on her face was one of true defeat, like she finally realized what she had lost. But honestly, it was too late for any real regret. I turned 18 like 3 weeks after that confrontation. Mr. Peterson helped me with all the legal procedures to access the trust fund my dad had left. And it turned out to be more than I thought. Enough to pay for college completely and have a good financial backup to start my adult life. I never heard from my mother or Scott again, and I didn't look for them either. I blocked their numbers, blocked their social media, basically erased them from my existence as much as I could. My Uncle Henry didn't say much about the whole thing. I think part of him felt bad about how he treated me during those years, but he never apologized directly. When I moved to go to college, I said goodbye to him cordially, without resentment, but also without affection, and since then, we only talk occasionally at Christmas or birthdays. Megan's family is still my real family. I spend all the holidays with them. Megan's mom still sends me packages of homemade food, even though I don't live with them anymore. And Mr. Peterson still gives me advice about everything, from taxes to relationships. Megan is my sister in everything but blood, and her parents are the honorary grandparents of any children I have in the future. I learned the hard way that family doesn't have to be blood, that you can build your own family with people who choose to stay with you and support you without expecting anything in return. Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if my mother had never come back, if she had left things as they were and simply forgotten about me forever. I think in a way it would have been easier, because I always could have had that little hope that maybe she did care, that maybe she had a good reason for leaving. But now I know the truth. I know she abandoned me because she simply didn't want to be a mother, and she came back only when she thought she could profit from me. It hurts. I'm not going to lie. There are still nights when I wonder what I did wrong for my own mother not to love me. But therapy has helped me understand that it wasn't anything I did, that her decisions were about her and her own problems, not about me. The other day, Megan's mom asked me if I would ever forgive my mother. And honestly, I don't know the answer. Part of me thinks that forgiveness is more for yourself than for the other person. That holding on to resentment only hurts me. But another part thinks that some things are simply unforgivable. That you don't have to forgive someone just because she's your biological mother. I guess time will tell. Although honestly, I don't see a future where my mother and I have any kind of relationship. She made her choice, and I made mine.